This is Dr. Alicia Wax Thomas with you again. And this is part 2 of the outline dealing with first civilizations. And this is for History 101, Western Civ. Okay, so we last left off with, in part 1, with the Neolithic Age and a little bit about the major developments of that age, which was an agricultural revolution took place and some settlements. Okay, so now we're going to continue on with the Bronze Age, which is the next age. And the Bronze Age, the time frame in which it started, it's really going to depend on, once again, as I've been saying throughout, what source you use, but some say it started as early as 4000 BC. Some kind of scale it back and really don't start it until about 3000 BC. And it lasted until approximately maybe somewhere around 1200 BC. Okay, this age is named after a new metal, and of course that new metal was bronze that came out during this time. And the bronze was much harder and it was more durable metal than copper or tin by itself. And what basically happened, let me explain this to you with the Bronze Age, and I want you to get this down. Man had knowledge of copper and man had knowledge of tin. Okay, and these are natural elements. If you look at a periodic chart of chemistry, you'll see these are natural elements. But what has happened is man has learned to combine these two natural elements to create a stronger metal. And that stronger metal, that new metal, is a big deal, especially when you're talking about weaponry, or as we commonly say today, weapons, okay? Dealing with warfare. Is it a coincidence that the ones who have the technology first are the ones who do the most conquering? No, that's not a coincidence, okay? So this is a big deal. The ones who had the stronger weapons, the more advanced technology, these were usually the ones who would conquer and rule over the others, okay? Another big deal that came out during the Bronze Age was you had an even stronger metal to come out, and that metal is iron. Please make sure you get that in your notes. And iron, of course, is far superior to bronze as far as its strength. And so that was a huge, and I do mean huge, deal for those who came across that technology first. Another thing that came out during the Bronze Age, which is going to be important as far as the development of civilizations, was the onset of writing, record keeping. Please get that down. Okay, we start to see clear indications of writing taking place, and that is going to be a huge deal as far as the development of civilizations. Okay, all right, so speaking of civilizations, first off, let's move on to that. What is a civilization? A civilization, first off, that's a Latin, it's coming from a Latin origin, the word civilization, and it basically means city, okay? And a very generic textbook definition of a civilization is it's a complex culture in which you will have a large number of people, and these people will share a number of common elements or characteristics. And historians typically have identified a number of basic characteristics of a civilization. Now, that number that has been identified by historians can vary depending on, you know, which side you lean to. Some have a list of 10 or more. Some have a list that they've narrowed down to. These are the most 4 crucial elements of a civilization, okay? There are 6 that I want you to get down in your notes. Please get these down. Put a star by them, highlight them, underline them, do whatever you need to do, but please get these down, okay? The first one is that your civilizations typically had advanced cities. Now, what in the heck does that mean, an advanced city? That's very, I don't know what that means. Well, what is meant by advanced city typically, they're talking about large populations, okay? So, large, what is that? That's a very subjective word. What is large to one person may not be large to another. When we're saying large, we're talking populations greater than, say, 20 or 30 people. If you look back in your notes and you go back to the Paleolithic age and how the communities were small, we're talking larger than that. Okay, that's what we're talking. And large enough for there to be distinguished social classes. That's number two. That's the second characteristic I want you to get down. All civilizations in the past, all civilizations today, and more than likely all civilizations in the future will have social classes. All right. In some ancient societies, your social classes were more stagnant, meaning whatever social class you were born in, that was typically the one you were going to die in. In some of your modern civilizations, you saw more, or you still can see more fluidity of, in the social classes, meaning you can move from one to the other. Preferably, those of us who may be in a lower social class, of course, we would prefer to move up, but that's something that's throughout the course of humankind. I don't care where you're at on the globe. This is not something that is just isolated to the West. This is global, all right? And social classes still exist to this very day. Make no mistake about it. All right, a third characteristic that you will see in civilizations is job specialization, okay? Get that in your notes, please. Job specialization. So what is meant by job specialization? What we mean by job specialization is that you will have groups within the society, people within the civilization that specialize, hence job specialization, that specialize in certain jobs. You're going to have a group that do nothing but the farming. You had a group that did nothing but, say, they were your merchants. You had a group that were your warriors. You had groups that were your leaders, and so forth. The more advanced your civilization was, and that still stands today, the more advanced your civilization is, the more job specialty you will see within that particular civilization. So I like to use with my students the United States, something that they're more, we're more familiar with. Most of us are American citizens. So let's say you're here, you're at Southern Union, and you're enrolled in college, and you're pursuing a degree, okay? And let's say you leave here and you go on to a four-year institution. Well, if you haven't already declared it, you will need to declare a major, okay, to graduate from whatever institution that you plan on going to. All right? Why? Because basically the concept is we want to know what is it that you're going to contribute to society, what is going to be your specialty. And our society is so advanced, sometimes we have subspecialties to our specialty. So it's like I tell students, let's say I'm located here in the Auburn-Opelika area, all right? So Auburn University is right down the road from me. And let's say I have a student that says, oh, I want to be an engineer. And they go to the College of Engineering at Auburn University. And they go and they tell someone, I want to be an engineer. Well, they're going to just look at you like, okay, sweetie, yeah, you want to be an engineer. We need this one already. It's kind of behind. Well, and they may start talking to you like you're a little slow. Like, well, sweetie pie, what kind of engineer? Do you want to be an electrical engineer, a computer engineer, a mechanical engineer, a civil engineer? You get the gist of what I'm saying here? You have subspecialties to the specialty because that's how advanced we are. All right? The United States is a very advanced nation, right? So I think you get it now, or I hope you do. Okay. The fourth characteristic of a civilization is writing, record keeping. This is huge. This is huge. Writing and record keeping. This is one of the ones that still will keep some societies from being classified as civilized to this very day, right? Because not all groups have written records. Not all groups have records of their histories, okay? As I said with job specialization, the more advanced your society is, the more record keeping you're going to see going on in that society. All right. So let's say, for example, once again, we're going to use the United States. The record keeping starts literally from the time you're born on you. When you're born, you have a birth certificate. You will get assigned, if you're a U.S. citizen, a Social Security number. You're going to have a host of records in between, whether they're shot records, school records, what have you. When you die, you will have a death certificate. You're going to have someone is going to record your death, a record of death. Okay, you have a host of other stuff in between, tax records. You're going to have, if you go to the grocery store, you buy something, typically they will give you a piece of paper. It's called a receipt, right? A record of your transaction. We are a record-driven society. We want records of everything. For you to be enrolled in my class, there needs to be some record of you, or else you don't exist. Okay, so that's a very, very big deal, this record keeping, but not all societies work that way. I've been blessed to be able to travel abroad. I've been to Africa. I've been to, I remember I was in a very small community, and the vehicle that I was traveling in, one of them, it needed some repairs done. Well, you know, I wanted the American, wanted a receipt, but my friend who was African, a native, he was like, don't you dare ask for a receipt. Please don't ask for a receipt. And I could tell by the way he was saying it, like, you ask for a receipt, it may not go well. Okay, so I was like, oh, okay. Because they didn't do that. That was very disrespectful from in their culture's viewpoint, to dare not take them at their word of what they said that they were going to do. Whereas as an American, I've kind of grown up in a society of I need a record of that, please. You know, so please be aware, all societies still don't do that today. All right, the next one, the fifth characteristic I want you to know about, is religious structure. Now this is something that you're going to see for those that are classified as civilized as well as uncivilized. Once again, if you recall back to your notes for part 1 of this outline, when we were talking about the when I was covering the Paleolithic age, and the topic of religion came up, and I've told you, as long as man has existed, we've always had some form of religion. Well, the same goes for civilization. All civilizations have had some type of religious structure in place. Once again, it may not be a religious structure that you approve of or that you choose to recognize, but nevertheless, it has always existed. Okay? The sixth and final characteristic that I want you to be aware of is a political structure. All civilizations have had some form of political structure. In the ancient world, most started off as monarchies being ruled by kings, but they evolved. Some had aristocracy, some had oligarchy, some had tyranny, some evolved into democracies. We'll get to that more when we get to the ancient Greeks, the birthplace of democracy. But some type of political structure has always been in place for a civilization. Not necessarily a society, a civilization. You have societies within civilizations, okay? All right? Okay, so moving on from there. What are the possible causes of a civilization? All right? We don't know with certainty what was the cause, the exact cause as to why the first civilization in the West came to fruition. I can't sit here and tell you that, oh, this is the exact reason. We have some very educated theories and guesses, because that's what a theory really is, as to why the first civilization came to be. And I want you to get some of these theories down. The first one is challenges, what I call challenges. And the thought is perhaps you had challenges that forced human beings to make an effort to come together to strengthen their numbers, right? Um, and I tell students, I just use very simple analogies so that you could try to better understand it. Let's say you have one big bear, a real live bear, and then you, okay? And the two of you are put in a closed arena or a closed room together. Who do you think is going to win that battle? You or the bear? I'm not a betting woman. I'm not in favor of gambling, but if I had to bet, I'm going to put my money on the bear. Okay? Now let's change it. And let's put a lot of you in that room with that same one bear. Let's put 5,000 of you in the arena with the one bear. Well, now you got a different situation. I believe that the bear will probably meet its demise. The bear is going to come down. It's going to fall. Now, mind you, as I normally tell students, he may take some of you out now. Not all of y'all might survive, but hopefully, if it's 5,000 against one bear, you know, someone's going to have the ability to bring the people together to work together to kind of handle the challenge of the bear. So that's what we mean by challenges. Maybe they came together in larger numbers to better handle challenges. Okay. The second one, a reason I want you to get down, a possible reason as to what led to the first civilization in the West, is what I refer to as material forces. Material forces. So a material force is something that's tangible, something that you can see, something that you can feel or touch. Okay? The number one material force, if this is the correct cause, the number one material force that would probably have brought people together in large numbers would have probably been food. I would dare say food. Because once again, if you do not have the food, you cannot sustain the people. Okay? It could have been a different material force, but I'm willing to say that would probably have been the number one material force if this is the true cause, which I cannot even tell you that this is the true cause. This is a theory. Okay? The third possible cause of a civilization is what I refer to as non-material forces. Non-material forces. A non-material force is something you cannot see, something you cannot physically touch, right? The number one non-material force, if this is the correct cause, that probably would have brought people together in large numbers, may have been religion. Religion is a very powerful force. It is an entity like none other. It can bring people together in large numbers, and it can tear them apart in large numbers. Many of your conflicts of the world have been because of religious differences. Many people have come together for religious purposes. I tell students, and I'm not promoting any one evangelist over another, but this is just somebody's just popping up in my mind. If we think about televangelists, people like Joel Osteen or someone like that, okay, this guy is filling up a coliseum that used to be a professional arena. I believe it was for basketball. I believe basketball arena. I could be wrong, but he's filling up a huge arena, okay, and the people are not coming in there just to eat pizza. They're coming in there because of a religious purpose. Religion is very, very powerful. Don't underestimate it. Make no mistake about it. Okay? All right. So next up, we move on to the first civilization for the West. And the first civilization for the West was your Mesopotamian civilization. Meso, once again, that means middle. Okay? Mesopotamia, that is... let me see here. Let me try and find a map here. I like to point to maps sometimes. Okay, so with Mesopotamia, once again, Meso meaning middle. So Mesopotamia basically means between two rivers. The two rivers, you have the Tigris River over here to your east, and then you have your Euphrates River here to your west. This area in between is what we call Mesopotamia. Okay, this is the modern day Iraq, what you're looking at on this map right here. The founders of this civilization is a group known as your Sumerians. Your Sumerians. Please make sure you get that down. Your Sumerians are credited as being the creators of the Mesopotamian civilization. What happened was that the Sumerians, they came into the area of Mesopotamia. They settled in an area down here, this region known as Sumer, right? And they built their civilization based on city-states. So all of these different little bullets you see, like Lagash, Adab, Umma, these are what we call Nippur, these are what we call city-states. The city-states, it's believed, they were at first independent of one another, politically independent, meaning each was ruled, had its own sovereign ruler. Okay, most started off as monarchies. Many of the people who lived during this time thought of their rulers sometimes as deities, as gods themselves. So you do have that concept of a theocracy too, where it was governed by divine authority. Let's go back here. Okay, with their city-states. All right, so what is also going on here, the Sumerians had the engineering ability and knew how to make leveled dwellings, so more than what we would call today like a 2 or 3 story building, which is that takes some ingenuity, that takes some engineering skills. They did have concept of an arch here. You can see like an arch going on here. This is very advanced. When you consider where we're at on the timeline. Where are we at on the timeline? We're back as far as 3000 BC, maybe even 3200 BC. That's where we're at on the timeline. Okay. I want you to know with the Sumerians, they were polytheistic, meaning they believed in many gods. All right. The economy of these city-states, the backbone of the economy was agriculture, meaning farming. Though farming was the backbone, they did have commerce and industry. They did have trade. Okay, they did trade. They did have they worked with textiles, that would be cloth. They worked in pottery. They also had trade in metalwork. As far as social ranks, remember, in order for a group to be considered civilized, they're going to have to meet that criteria, that list of six characteristics that I gave you on the last slide as to what is it that scholars are looking for to claim a group of people are civilized. Typically, the social ranks, I'm not including the king and the royal family. Needless to say, they're at the tippy top. But after that, your society was broken into 3 broad categories. The first being your nobles. And your nobles, many of these were people who were often related to the royal family, distant relatives. You also had priestly officials and their families in that first ranking of nobility. Then the second social ranking is what we call your commoners. And this is where the bulk of the society fell, was in the second grouping. This would be like your farmers, your merchants, your craftsmen, and so forth. Once again, the backbone of this society is farming, and it's thought by some that 90% of the population is made up of farmers. Okay, so there's your second grouping is right there. All right, and then your third grouping for social ranks was slaves. This is the lowest in any society, in any civilization still in the world today. All right. Sometimes I have students that say peasants. Well, no, you got to go a little bit lower than a peasant. Well, sometimes a lot lower. And that would be your slaves. Did slaves make up the majority of the population? No, they did not. But slavery did exist. And let me say this about slavery. Slavery is an age-old institution. Unfortunately, probably as long as man has existed, you've had some form of slavery to take place. All right. Another thing about this civilization, and this is one of the key things that really gets this group into textbooks, and that is that they had a form of writing in place. Please make sure you get that down. They had a form of writing in place. This form of writing is known as cuneiform. Okay, it's called cuneiform. And it comes from the Latin word cuneus, C-U-N-E-U-S, cuneus, and that means wedge, okay? And what happened was you had a special group of people who did the writing in this civilization, and they were known as your scribes. And your scribes, they had to do an extensive amount of learning and studying to learn all the symbols. But with cuneiform, the Sumerians originally started off using wet clay tablets, and your scribes would take an instrument known as a stylus. And the stylus was basically, I tell students, a glorified stick, okay? And at the end of that stick, you had a tip, and it was wedge shape, hence the name cuneiform. And they would take that tip and they would make impressions into the wet clay tablets. And then, of course, they would let it dry. And this is how they would communicate in writing. Now, why did this writing develop? We're not exactly sure as to why, the exact reason as to why the Sumerians began record keeping. But many believe that it was a way for them to keep an account of the goods, to record the goods that that the people were bringing to the temple, to the storehouses. Okay, and then from there it may have evolved to where they started recording myths and prayers and laws and treaties and business contracts. So that they were no longer only recording grain harvest. They were recording more than just food. But I want to point that out because there's that connection once again back to the food. You have to have the food to sustain the people. Right? Food is very important. Okay? All right? Some other accomplishments of this group that I want to just briefly mention. They were very advanced as far as their abilities with the calendar system. They had a pretty accurate calendar system. They studied astronomy, they studied the skies, and they recorded movement of what we refer to in ancient history as the heavenly bodies. We know that they measured time in increments of 60 minutes. We know that they had knowledge of a circle having 360 degrees. Some claim that your Sumerians had developed a form of basic algebra and geometry based on number system on 6. That I can't really delve into great knowledge of, but some make that claim. Some people in the academic world make that claim about the Sumerians. Okay, your next group, you had a group known as the Akkadians. The Akkadians, okay, and with the Akkadians were coming from this area as well, but they were coming from an area known as Akkad. Okay, so your Akkadians were coming, once again, this is the Mesopotamian region. This is the Tigris River right here again. This is the Euphrates River. This is the area of Sumer. This is emptying into the Persian Gulf, okay? So this is Mesopotamia, all right? So Another region is Akkad, and with the Akkadians that are coming from this area here, or that came from that area, the thing about the Akkadians, when people talk about the Akkadians, typically they like to kind of hone in or zero in on its best known ruler, and his name was Sargon. So as I tell students, when you see a name on my outline or on a PowerPoint, ask yourself, what's the claim to fame? Why is this person's name even mentioned or put in history books? Sargon's claim to fame is he's credited as being the first to create an empire, a dynastic empire. Okay, and what basically happened was that you had these independent city-states, and Sargon and his people, the Akkadians, were strong enough to come in and conquer them and unite them all under one rule. Whose rule? His rule. Okay? And so then it passed on to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. But unfortunately, his empire, or the Akkadian Empire, came to a close. Where are we at on the timeline? With Sargon, somewhere maybe roughly around 2340 BC, and then by the time the empire fell, the Akkadian Empire fell, you're looking at around 2100 BC. So the Akkadians did fall from power, as all great civilizations have fallen from power. And I know that's a scary thought, but history has taught us that at some point in time, that has been a theme throughout history, at some point in time, they will come down. So that's what happened there with the Akkadians. But once again, the claim to fame is that they were the first to create an empire. And basically what happened, Sargon went in and he conquered the other groups. Now with this said, in order to conquer the other groups, that meant that Sargon had to have a pretty darn good military. He was probably a good military leader himself, but he definitely had to have a good military. Why? Because human nature, people do not simply hand over land. Okay? People fight and die for the right to land. You still have wars to this very day over who has the right to what piece of land. So in order for him to go in and do that and take over control of it, that meant that it was probably done by force. And in order to have that force, typically you're going to have a strong military behind you. Also, there is evidence that shows that Sargon was able to stimulate a period of economic growth. There appeared evidence is pointing that there was probably prosperity and a cultural flowering that took place during his reign, during the time in which he was able to establish his Akkadian Empire. However, as I've already stated, his successors were ultimately unable to preserve the empire, and what happened was the Akkadian Empire fell as a result of attacks from neighboring groups. And once again, the fall happened roughly around 2100 BC, and the end of the Akkadian Empire, when the Akkadian Empire fell, it brought a return to the independent city-states of Mesopotamia. So these city-states once again gained their independence. Okay, now these, keep in mind, these city-states make up the civilization, but each city-state, I tell students, think of them as mini nations, mini, M-I-N-I, as in tiny nations, each one independent. But when Sargon had come into power and the Akkadians had taken over, they lost their independence and they were all united under his rule. Now they have regained their independence with the fall of the Akkadian Empire. Of course, Sargon is dead. He died before the fall of the empire, but when the empire fell, they regained their independence. Okay, All right, so we're going to end there for part 2 of the outline of First Civilizations. There will be a continuation of this outline. There will be a part 3, so make sure you look for it because you will need it for your first test. Thank you. Bye-bye.